Okay, well, welcome everyone, and that's a lot of fun to be here to talk about this new product. It's always fun to play with a preview of a product, especially when there is something you feel like you can have some input in, where it's not a finished product and you kind of say, gee, I wish they had done this, this, and this. Well, that's kind of the idea here, is that this is just the beginning, and it's already got some pretty exciting things in it, I think, and uh, once we get a chance to all play with it and get our feedback to onOne, I think it's going to be interesting to see where this product goes. Now, in the introduction, Brian mentioned that, of course, one of the main ways that this product is being suggested is as an add-on to Lightroom. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, as many people know, I'm not a Lightroom user. I don't use Lightroom very much at all, just for reasons just simply because the type of photography that I do, frankly, the main reason is because a lot of the time I take photographs with the intent of actually going into Photoshop and using layers. In fact, I even coined a term for myself called a Photoshop photographer, where I deliberately take photos thinking ahead to now I'll take this into Photoshop and use layers. So as a result, frankly, Lightroom really wasn't a good solution for me because up until now anyway, there wasn't an easy way to access layers without having to go back and forth to Photoshop, which of course you could do, but with perfect layers, that's kind of the idea. So having said all that, what I'm going to show you is the fact that Perfect Layers also happens to be a standalone product. So all the things I'm going to show you could easily be done starting with I'm in Lightroom and then I do this. I just don't happen to be using Lightroom today. So everything you see within Perfect Layers is the same. That part doesn't change because the product is the same as how you access it. And as an interesting aside, I think the fact that it is also can be used as a standalone product is kind of interesting. So I'm going to do this from within Bridge so that I can visually look at the images that I want and then access them directly into Perfect Layers, so I don't have to worry about finding things and launch them. I could also start in Perfect Layers too, but this is kind of the point. So just as a quick example here, I've got a couple of raw files in Bridge that I'll just select, and then if I right-click and choose Open With, and one of the options is Perfect Layers, and it jumps me right over there, and you'll see in a fairly short period of time, it's going to open up these two raw files. Now, before I continue with this, last night I did an experiment, and I thought it'd be interesting to actually compare just from a speed standpoint. So what I did was this: I took these same two images, which were camera raw files, I opened them from Bridge in RAW, and then immediately, without doing anything, opened them in Photoshop. So I, of course, opened two separate documents that I then dragged one on top of the other into Photoshop. And that whole process took just about 40 seconds, which isn't a huge amount of time. But as you saw right here, doing exactly the same thing in Perfect Layers, well, when I timed it, it was like 12.8 seconds. So just as a real quick way of saying, you know what, I just want to open these images really quickly, this is an interesting way to do it. Now, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just do it in Photoshop? Well, part of the way I think this is an interesting way to look at this product is as just sort of a maybe testing out an idea. Before you go to all the trouble of doing everything in Photoshop, say, I just want to kind of test it out and see, is this even an idea that's worth pursuing? You know, I have an image I'm thinking would look nice if I put a texture over the top, but I'm not 100% sure. So that's what I would use it for here. So now that I'm in here, you can see it has a very simple but interface that's easy to understand because it's very much like we're used to in Photoshop. So here's my two layers that have been created. And for example, I can right away just say I just want to make this one fit. So we'll just get this to squeeze up here. Of course, it's going to a little. There we go. I'm just trying to move one corner so I can kind of match up and then make it fit. And at this point, this is where simple but easy things to do in this product. And one of my favorite ones, and I've been harping on this to Adobe for years, ever since I saw my first onOne product that used blending modes. This is the way blend modes should work. Hello, Adobe. Watch this. This is the way blend mode should work. Instead of having to click on each one and let go, you just hover over the blend mode and it shows you very quickly what you're going to get. Simple but that's the way blend mode should work, isn't it? In fact, recently at Photoshop World, I was demonstrating this in PhotoFrame, and the Adobe booth was next door, and I was kind of jokingly shouting, "Hey, Adobe, check this out. This is the way blend mode should work." So a simple idea like this to say, yes, I think multiply mode is the one I want, but I was able to just kind of hover to figure that out. And of course, things you would also expect like opacity. Now, we also have some other options in here. Of course, you can have a navigator if you want to look. Right now, I want to see the entire image, but I can very quickly switch to 100% view or back. The other thing that I think is really nice, very nicely done, is that for those people that are familiar, have used Photoshop layers, a lot of the principle is the same. For example, if you want to duplicate a layer, it's Command or Control J, just like it is in Photoshop. So it's not like you have to learn new shortcuts to be able to do those kind of things. So now I've got two versions, both in multiply mode. But this is where the experimental part starts to be kind of interesting. And again, these are all things we can do right inside here. So I'm just going to hide this middle layer and go back to the top one. It's in multiply mode, because maybe when I was doing that kind of hovering thing, I like multiply mode for the sky, but maybe I like, say, not hard light, but maybe lighten, overlay. I want something different for the sky and for the water. So on this top one, I just want to say, you know what, paint out certain areas. So I just go to my masking tool. It has a brush kind of concept, and again, we can use very familiar things, the bracket keys, left bracket to make smaller, right bracket to make it bigger. And right now it's sent to paint out, so I can just very quickly start painting and go through and say, these are the areas that I don't want this layer to blend in. Now, as you might expect, this is the kind of thing where I'm sure as the product continues to grow, this will be a little smoother. Right now it's still a little jumpy, but that's okay, because for what I'm trying to do, frankly, it's still working fairly nicely. I can still see what I want. Now, at this point, I'm just telling it mask out, but I can't really see where I'm masking. So if I switch to the overlay, kind of like a quick mask type function, now it's a little easier for me to see where I'm at and if there's any parts that I missed, so I could fill in all these blanks and so on. You can also decide if you want to see it in white to make it really obvious, or as kind of like looking at the mask itself. Most of the time, I think I would probably use this overlay method, just because you can see it in the context of your photo. So I won't bother doing the whole thing. I mean, of course, I could zoom in closer and get more detailed with a smaller brush, but I'm really just trying to show you the basic idea at this point. So now I've got this top layer just in that multiply mode in the sky. So let's hide that for a second and go to this middle one, turn it back on. And again, it's in multiply, so we want to change it to, and let's do something. I probably wouldn't actually do this because it's a little extreme, but just so you can see the idea, what if I decided I wanted to have something. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's still too much. I was trying to get something that would be easier for you to see, but you can kind of see it there. And then now the same thing, I could say, well, let's paint out the sky in this case. So simply by making a second copy, it's fairly easy for me to just go in and combine them together to say, okay, on this layer, I want to mask it here. On this other layer, I want to mask it there. And that way it gives me a very quick ability to have two different blend modes in effect. And this is where I would, if I was doing this for a real project, I would spend more time and I would zoom in closer, make my brush more accurate. You get the idea. But let's just turn that off and then turn this layer back on. And now we're starting to get an interesting effect of the same texture, but blended in two different ways for two different parts of our document. So very simple and easy to do. Now, we also have, of course, there are other tools like you might expect. If you had zoomed in and zoomed out, there's a hand tool for panning and a zoom tool and all the things you would normally expect. If at this point I decided that this was such an amazingly beautiful work of art, just use your imagination, that I wanted to continue to use this, then I could save it, and it would save it just as you see it, with a layered document with multiple layers, including the masks. If I decided I wanted to create a JPEG of this to send to someone, then I would choose export. So save and save as are PSD Photoshop documents with the layers intact. Export is how I get a JPEG out of here. Now, one thing that I discovered the hard way as I was experimenting with this, because of course when it's a new product like this in a preview, you just kind of play with things and see what you can do. So at this point I thought, okay, now I want to start another project, so I just switched back to Bridge and I said open in Perfect Layers, and it opened it as part of this document. So if I'm finished with this, then I would close it and start a new project, because I don't really want my new layers to get added to this one. So I'm going to go back to Bridge here. And here's another example. Here's 3 files that I took, and again, these were files that I took specifically with the idea in mind of combining them in Photoshop. So again, one of the reasons why I don't use Lightroom as much is because it would have forced me to go to Photoshop anyway for this. So this is where now I could experiment with this directly in Perfect Layers if I wanted to. Now, just as an aside, in this case, there is actually a function through Photoshop in Bridge, through the Photoshop Tools menu, that says load files into Photoshop layers. And what this would do, would take these 3 documents and it would automatically load them into one document, each image on a separate layer. Now I tried that, and it took just about a little over 19 seconds when I tried this last night. And so then I thought, okay, well, again, for the purpose of comparison, let's do that open with Perfect Layers and see how long it took in this case. And you can see it took like hardly any time at all. I was like, I don't even count that, but it was like, what, maybe 3 or 4 seconds to end up with the images here in Perfect Layers, all nicely in separate layers that I can then play with. So at this point, it's just a matter of me deciding. I can change the order of the layers if it makes better sense to have this layer down below. In fact, I think it doesn't in this case, but you can certainly play them around, and again, very quickly lower the opacity to kind of see how they're matching up if you wanted to move them around a little bit. But here's an example of how I would use this. I think this would look pretty nice if I painted out this top layer, masked it so that the layer below would show. So just take my masking tool and again just start painting a little bit, and very quickly I can see, while it's looking pretty good, there obviously is a bit of a problem with the horizon line matching up. So at this point I could switch to the move tool and just kind of move around to kind of make it look the way that I want. Or if it made better sense, I could go to the other layer and move it around to match. The other thing that we can always do is, of course, experiment with this. For example, maybe what I really want is for her to be there, but kind of like a ghost. So I've already done the masking on the top layer. Now I'm taking the middle layer and kind of lowering the opacity so I can kind of see through to the original background. And all of this was done, again, just simply by opening and then doing some quick experimentation. So that's pretty much it. Oh, there's one other thing I should show because it's kind of a cool idea. So let me put this back. I'm going to go up here and also reset the mask back to kind of normal. And that's this tool here. The trim tool is kind of interesting. If you just want a really quick way to say, I want to just take this part of this layer, when you hit enter, it does a quick mask. So in this case, obviously it doesn't blend in perfectly, but it's just to show you how quick it is if you just want to get almost like a quick proof to say, is this working? Does this match up the way I want? The trim tool works really nicely for that. And then again, if you do decide to take this into Photoshop to work on it further, it'll show up in Photoshop as a layer with a layer mask. So I think kind of where I'm looking at this as an interesting possibility is for, and again, just let me stress that all the things I'm doing in Perfect Layers would be the same as if you started in Lightroom. It's the same basic principle. So using the product itself works the same way. But I'm intrigued by the fact that I can do these things very quickly, and let's be honest, there'll be times where I'll go into Photoshop because I know there are more functionality. But given the fact that the speed is quite remarkable, how quickly it does things like open files, I think it's a really interesting way to kind of do, like I said, that kind of test run to go, is this an idea that's worth pursuing? Do a quick test in here. You say, yeah, now that I know this is actually going to work, let's go into Photoshop and just do that last little bit of fine tuning. Or if you don't have Photoshop, just finish it off in here and then take it back into Lightroom and work on it from there. So that's basically what I wanted to show you. Brian, you wanted to jump in and talk about some of the things to do with Aperture?
Yeah, I wanted to spend a few minutes showing you guys. I'm going to take control for a second and just bear with me. Attendee list. There we go. All right, so there are a few things that I want to show you that came up as part of the questions. The first one I'm going to start off with is in Lightroom. So there may be times in Lightroom where you install Perfect Layers, and normally to launch Perfect Layers from Lightroom, you go to the File menu, you go to Plugin Extras, and you'll see Perfect Layers. If for some reason you don't see this option here, but you installed Perfect Layers, just go to the Plugin Manager, you'll hit Add, and then what you'll want to do is navigate to the folder where Perfect Layers is installed in. So in this case here, I'm going to go to my volume, and I'll go to my applications folder, scroll down to Perfect Layers, and then under the Perfect Layers folder, there's another folder called Plugin Files, and then there is your Lightroom plugin. So you'll hit Add Plugin, and it'll add it, and then you'll be able to use it within Lightroom. So that's just a quick thing that I wanted to bring up there. The other demo that I wanted to show you really quickly was with Aperture. So with Aperture, the fully baked support for Aperture will come in the final version midsummer, but there is still a way for you to get Perfect Layers functionality right within the product. If you're an Aperture user, just go to the Aperture icon. Again, Aperture is Apple only, so this doesn't pertain to PCs. Go to the Preferences item, then go to the Export tab. The first field you'll see is called External Photo Editor. So you'll just hit Choose. You'll scroll down to the Perfect Layers folder again, and you'll select the Perfect Layers application. Then you'll hit Select. You can then choose whether you want to work in PSD files or TIFF files. I'm just doing 8-bit PSDs for now. And then you can also specify the color space. So I profile my displays routinely. So this is my Color Monkey display for my Dell display here. No problem. And what you can do now is, so I'm going to show you just a quick demo that I showed the other day in Aperture. So here, if I have this image and I want to create a virtual copy of it, so we're going to go to Photos and then go to Duplicate Version. We now have 2 copies of the same image. And I can go to the Adjustments, drop the saturation, boost the contrast, and then select both images now and go to Photos and edit with Perfect Layers. So Perfect Layers is set as an external editor. It'll launch the product. You've got your layers that you see here, and now you can go through the same blending modes and masking options that Dave just showed you about. So you can kind of go through, see what you like. So I'm going to actually work on this really quickly so that you can see what happens when you go to File, Save. I'm going to select my masking brush here and drop my opacity really low, and I'm going to bring my feathering way up. I'm just going to kind of paint in some of that original skin tone from the underlying layer to get rid of a little bit of that hotness. And so you can see here what we were able to do. If I go to File, Save, it's going to update that PSD file that was created. And when we go back into Lightroom, or rather into Aperture, you can see here's our original image. Here's our composite image right in Lightroom. What I typically do is I'm going to delete the duplicates. The way Aperture currently works is whatever images you send in to Perfect Layers, it will duplicate. So if I sent, for instance, 4 images in, I would have 4 duplicates. So it's pretty easy. All you need to do is select them. You can right-click and go to Delete Versions. But you do now have this version from perfect layers. And you can do other things like, do your layer masking and stuff like that as well. I'm going to show you this quick technique, kind of in the same vein as what Dave just showed you. It's a motor drive sequence. I love working on this image. To me, this is just a lot of fun. You can see we have these 4 images here of this snowboarder. And in Lightroom, what I can do is I can select them because so Dave was the first photographer actually in these presentations that used perfect layers outside of Lightroom to show you that it's perfectly viable outside of Lightroom. And I want to show you aperture so you can see that for those aperture users out there, you can still take part of the perfect layers public preview release. Now what I can do in Lightroom is I can select these. I'm going to go to File, Plug in Extras, and select Perfect Layers. It's going to launch the product as expected. And here we've got these 4 layers. Now, in situations like this, when you have these 4 layers, I always recommend starting at the bottom. So I turn off the top 2 layers, and what I'm going to do here is I just want to kind of mix these 2 layers together. And I'm going to use our trim tool. I like the trim tool. Dave showed it to you as well. All you need to do is make a selection, kind of like a crop box selection. And I try to get as tight as possible around my subject. If you want, you could readjust the selection. You can reposition it wherever you want, but I'm just going to put it where I need it. And I'm going to hit the Enter or Return key, and what that's going to do is it's going to mask out the image. But what I want to do is I want to drop the opacity, and I want to make sure that this guy is aligned. So you can see how I'm aligning him to the mountain in the background. When I'm done there, I can bring up my opacity so you can see the fully registered second motor drive sequence. And you can see that with the mask option viewed, you can see what the clipping mask did, or not the clipping mask, the trim mask did. So I use the trim tool to make a trim mask, and it's just basically conforms to the shape of your selection. Now I can just really quickly, again, I'm going to bring this layer on. I'm going to drop the opacity. And then with my move tool, I'm just going to align it just to make sure they're kind of pretty much aligned. You can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard. So you can go up and down, left and right by pixel lengths. And when you're ready, you can bring the opacity up, select the trim tool, and then just quickly make your selection here. And then one more time. I'm going to select this one here, drop the opacity. With my move tool, again, you want to make sure that your images are aligned, because if you mask in a part of the image that doesn't line up, it just looks sloppy. So here what I can do is I can use my trim tool, bring it up here, and this is just using the trim tool. I could have used the masking brush, but this is easier for me. And if I go to File, Save, I'll have that PSD file updated. And as Dave said, it's just a faster solution that works really nicely with your existing workflow. So here's my image. Here's the PSD file. Now, to Dave's point, if I right-click on this and go to Edit in Photoshop, and I'll edit, I can edit the original or a copy. I'll bring it into Photoshop. You'll see that you've got the 4 layers with the masks that you create in perfect layers. So if you need to do more advanced stuff, like you want to use Mask Pro maybe, or use Photo Tools, like we can now go here and go into Photo Tools, and then start applying some presets. Like if we want, we can convert this to black and white. And then just hit apply, and now you've updated the image. You can go to File, Save. And there you go. So now you've gone ahead in just maybe a minute worth of time, you've used Lightroom to kind of mask these images together, and then you used Photo Tools. I could have also gone to Photo Tools straight from Lightroom. I could have just gone to Plugin Extras and selected Photo Tools. So it's just another tool in your arsenal to use, and we find that the perfect layers bring some amazing masking and blending functionality that you never had before. So with that, what I want to do is I'm just going to get to the questions module to see if there are any questions. If you have, so I see Hirsch has some is getting there. There are some situations in with using perfect layers on Lightroom where you get the a critical error. Let me show you. Let's go into perfect layers really quickly, and I'll show you how you can go through the process of submitting feedback, because Hirsch, we definitely want to hear from you. Let's just take an image here. Actually, let's just launch perfect layers. Oops. Close here. If you go to the help menu and then you go to provide feedback, it's going to open up the website FAQ article. That, first of all, is important because it shows you upcoming features that are not currently in the release. So you can see here what we're building in. We also have some known issues, but also more importantly, at the bottom, to submit your feedback by email, please contact us. So if you click on this link, it'll open up your email application, and it'll actually have the email already addressed out to us. Now, it's important when you send us your feedback, give us this information up here. The more information you give us, the better we can troubleshoot. And we want to make sure that we troubleshoot as much as possible currently. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can show you. I'm just going to, let me go to the questions module really quickly. Can you replace a white sky with a blue sky? Yeah, absolutely. There's an example I can show you really quickly. If we go back into Lightroom, where is it? Dan took a really cool shot in Hawaii. There it is. So here, let me delete all these extra PSDs that I have because I don't need these. You've got two basic images. The first image is exposing for the sky, and the next image is exposing for the foreground. And so what you can do is you can select these two images and then go to perfect layers and really quickly just mask in. And what I typically like to do is I'll have my masking brush here, and I like to work in lower opacities, not at 100%, because it gives me a little bit of forgiveness as I get to the horizon here. And that's also why you want to have a nice big feather, is because the inner circle is where you're going to kind of have your hard edge, and you can see now that even though my inner circle is about an inch or so above the horizon, it's not actually painting in, which is good. And so when you have your opacity down below 100%, your strokes are iterative. So as you keep drawing on here, it applies the mask. So here I want to even that out. And then here I might just drop the brush size and just kind of get a little bit darker at the horizon. And this is totally subjective to taste, you know, how much of the horizon you want to darken, but you're getting the best of both worlds here. You bring that sky into this image, and there's your layer mask. You can also see here, if you turn on the overlay, oops, let me turn the mask here. You want to be on the correct layer when you turn your overlay on. But there's my overlay mask. Here's my white mask. Now, the cool thing about the white mask is as you paint more and more, it's going to become more solid white. So you can see how as I'm drawing, it's getting more and more solid. If it's pure solid white, that means you fully masked through to the next layer. And then you can also undo back. You can undo back to the beginning of your image. It'll save your history states. So now you can go to File, Save, or again, you can go to File, Export if you want to save a JPEG or a TIFF file. But I like maintaining my images, so I go to File, Save here. Now here's an important question too. You know, can you open up PSD files from Photoshop into perfect layers? The answer is yes and no, or yes with a caveat. Currently, if you have certain objects in Photoshop that are not supported, like smart objects, if you try to open the PSD file in perfect layers currently, it's going to flatten the image automatically. So just be warned, and it will give you a warning before it does anything. So if you try to do something there, it won't work. But I could go now and go to File, Open, and here's that sky PSD that I just saved. I can hit Open, and I have my two layers just as I had them with the mask, so I can continue working on them after the fact. Just going to see if there are any other previews. Yes, Christiana, the so on my masking brush, the inner circle is the hard edge, the outer circle is kind of a softer feathered edge, and the more distance in between the two circles, the more of a gradient or more of a gradual brush you'll have. Um, will the public version be easy to uninstall? Absolutely, just delete it. On a Mac, you can just delete it. I don't recall on the PC. I think there's an uninstaller for the PC, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, oh, Paul brings up Paul, great question. Thank you for bringing this up. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to see if I want to make sure that there are no other questions. John asked a question in terms of, can you add a 50% gray layer and then paint in? You will be able to do that with the final version. When we release the final version, you will be able to create new empty layers and then fill them with certain colors, like 50% gray. And you can, a lot of times people will do that as an overlay to like dodge and burn in Photoshop. That's what I do. Exactly, Andy. Why would we want to uninstall it? All right. What I'm going to do here is, here, actually, Dave.
Yes.
This is actually, I can kind of answer this for you, but the question was, do you prefer Lightroom or Aperture?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. I have Lightroom on my laptop. That's the end.
As far as you go. For
I have
me,
launched it several times.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I think you'll agree, Dave, that like any other tool, you try it out, which is why I assume you installed it, and then if it works for you, if it's in your workflow, you use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important to evaluate what works best for you.
Now, one thought that just occurred to me as well, actually two things based on the questions. Like one, someone asked about replacing the blue sky. One of the things that I talk about in my Photoshop photography classes is that anytime you see a nice sky, grab it, just take a photo of it, and then stick it in a folder somewhere called sky. So then if you do have a case where you have a blown out sky or you just couldn't expose for the way you want it, you know you have a collection of skies that you can mask in, as Brian just showed you. Building on that same idea, if you like the idea of having a solid gray layer for some reason, then when you have a moment in Photoshop, just save a gray document. And then for now, until the update comes when we'll be able to do all those other things, just bring that into perfect layer that way.
Oh my God, you just blew my mind, actually. I'm not even joking. As soon as you were saying that, I'm like, that's a eureka moment. So what Dave is saying is, if you do need, it is roundabout for now because the functionality is not there in perfect layers, but it is coming. You can just create that layer. So if there is a 50% gray layer that you want, just save it as a JPEG or save it as pretty much any file format, and then bring it into perfect layers from Lightroom. I do that a lot, actually. I'll have stock folders of just various things that I use, like to Dave's point, sky images and textures. I just keep those. And do not discount the ability to use your iPhone. I said this earlier, I think in a previous webinar, to grab a cool texture image or a sky. Typically, skies and textures, the 5-megapixel camera of an iPhone 4 is plenty of data to mask in a sky. And for texture, which you're typically going to be just blending in, you don't need that much resolution. So it works really well. And then that also works extremely well with perfect layers.